Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Panoply's August webinar. We're super excited to present data-driven insights as we take a look at NurseGrid's data infrastructure and get to know Lorenzo Ciacci, who is the CTO at NurseGrid. We're super excited to present this in partnership with Chartio. We're going to go ahead and get started now. So just a few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, so if you would like to refer to it later, pass it on to a friend, or if Lorenzo says something that is super smart that you want to go back and take meticulous notes on, feel free. And then the second housekeeping item is that we are going to be asking questions, or sorry, we're going to be taking questions at the end. We have a dedicated time at the end for questions and answers, but so go ahead and use the GoToWebinar chat facility. There's a questions button on the right-hand side. Feel free to use it at any point. And if we do have a question that's contextual to the slide or the thing that we're talking about, I'm going to go ahead and ask that question. But we do have questions and answers at the end, so feel free to use the facility there. So let's talk about today's speakers. My name is Jason Harris. I'm the evangelist at Panoply. I help tell the story of how customers are using data within their organizations, and in that vein, that brings us to today's webinar. I'll go ahead and introduce, or let Lorenzo introduce himself. Go ahead, Lorenzo.
Morning, Lorenzo Ciacci. I'm the CTO at NurseGrid. I've been here for about 1.5 years, and we're a small startup that's concerned with schedule distribution for nurses and to make nurses' lives better. That's basically our underlying mission. I'm always hyper data focused and data driven when coming into a new role, and also working with a small startup. And basically, I'm excited to tell you about how Chartio and Panoply have sort of saved us over the past year and what we've been able to do. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. I'll pass it over to Tracy.
All right, hi everyone, my name's Tracy. I'm one of the data advisors at Chartio. So I'm sitting in the customer success team, and I work with some of our enterprise customers on data and product related issues. So anything from advising on data governance, to something going on in their data, to dashboard design. So those are the types of questions I typically help them with. And yeah, excited to be with y'all today to represent Chartio.
Great, perfect. And then before we dig into to Lorenzo's presentation, let's talk about what we're going to speak to. So first we'll introduce Panoply, the idea of a Panoply data warehouse, and what that means and how your business could draw value from it. We'll go over an overview of Chartio and how Chartio dashboards look and how they work seamlessly with the Panoply data warehouse. We'll introduce the idea of NurseGrid to you, the company, the founding story and the mission of it. And then we'll get into Lorenzo himself, and we'll talk about data and analytics in an software engineering organization. So a bit about Panoply. What is Panoply? Panoply is a data warehouse that is built for the cloud, and it does three things. It's a data ingestion engine. We are an automated data warehouse, and we have what we call the query optimization engine. We've been around since 2015. As you can see, we have some nice accolades that we've gotten on G2 Crowd from our customers, and also from Gartner, being named a cool vendor a few weeks ago. And then we're backed by some really fun groups who believe in this as well. So we're basically in one phrase, we're an all-in-one data platform. We exist so that you can connect. So Panoply, I call it a database of databases. You can connect all of your data sources into Panoply. So it doesn't matter if it's a MongoDB database, it's Postgres, if it's flat files such as a CSV or an API. So it could be Salesforce, it could be Google Analytics, it could be Twitter ads. All of the data can come into one place so that you can query it and make sense of it all in one place, and then attach a business intelligence tool like Chartio to build dashboards to share data within your organization. So there's three facets to Panoply: the data ingestion engine, which is the tool that brings all the data in one place; automated data warehouse. So we are built on top of Amazon Redshift, and if you've looked into data warehouses, you know that typically an organization, whether it's a small company or a big enterprise, if you want to deploy a data warehouse, it requires either a dedicated person or a dedicated team, a full-fledged data engineer who is going to be sure that all those queries are running efficiently. The data warehouse is being optimized and maintained the way it needs to. So we automate all that for one low monthly cost. And then the second thing is the query optimization engine. So our AI and ML-driven algorithms are making sure that your queries, when you run them, are returning results as fast as possible. We love working with folks like Chartio because we make existing dashboards run quickly and more efficiently. So those are the three things: the data ingestion engine, the automated data warehouse, and the query optimization engine. So in terms of expanding on those three things, any data you want, you can bring in and have ingested and ready for querying in a matter of minutes, not days. We work with unstructured and structured data, and your data is always up to date. You can schedule data ingestion to happen every hour, so you have a virtually real-time view of your data. I know that we have some e-commerce companies that are bringing in Shopify data all the time, so that they know what their hourly and daily sales look like, so that they can adjust promotions. So everything's up to date. It's there. It's fast. It's ready for you. And then we have a lot of integrations. So everything from Mixpanel to Instagram to YouTube to Asana, Postgres, Mongo, like whatever. We pretty much any data you have, you can bring in, especially maybe it's an experiment. Maybe you ran a marketing experiment and you have a CSV that came out of this a new tool you were trying out. You can bring all that data in and compare it to the rest of your data sets. And now I'll turn it over to Tracy.
Great, thanks so much.
Yeah.
At Chartio, our mission is to join people on data. So we're a cloud-based business intelligence tool, and we're consistently ranked very highly on G2. Our customers include DoorDash, WeWork, Squarespace, Udemy, for example. And with Chartio, you could easily connect a wide range of data sources to Chartio to get insights to your data. So we support anything from your Postgres database or Google Analytics to Snowflake. You could also upload a CSV file and connect to Google Sheet to easily analyze some of your data. And of course, we support connections to Panoply. So once you have all your data loaded into Panoply, you could connect it to Chartio and then create dashboards out of it. Okay, so with Chartio, some of our values are ease of use and time to value. So with our drag and drop visual SQL interface, you could easily explore your data without knowing any SQL. But you could also type in your own SQL for the data analysts in your team. So it's kind of twofold there. You could also use our data pipeline to powerfully transform and blend data from multiple data sources. So if you have data in your Snowflake database and also Snowflake, and also data in a CSV, for example, or data in Panoply, you can easily query both sources and then combine them together. And lastly, after you do that, you could obviously share your charts and dashboards with the rest of your organization. You could add users to your dashboards so they have permissions to see the metrics and the charts you've created. Or you could also set up alerts and emailed reports. And this is just a preview of our current Visual SQL interface. As you can see, it's pretty simple to drag columns into the measures and dimensions, apply your filters, and create your charts. And then you could create awesome looking dashboards like this executive summary dashboard. Then you could share them with the rest of your organization.
Perfect. Let's turn it over to Mr. Lorenzo.
Good morning. I guess this is the part where I talk about myself for a little bit. Effectively, this is me. While nerding out, I also enjoy playing drums. So between those two things, that's pretty much all of what I get to do. I've been in Portland, well, since about 91, and I think in the tech scene since the late 90s, probably about 97. And through that, I've spent the last, I'd say, 10 years in startups and have learned a lot, and the space has transformed quite a bit. And while in that space, I've learned some of the primary goals that can get addressed really quickly and things that can help bring clarity to an organization is getting the data in front of everyone so that you can enable the entire organization to be data driven rather than just making siloed decisions and gut level based decisions. While there's nothing wrong with any of those, having sort of a unified view of performance metrics, of customer inputs and outputs, and certainly sales data really tends to help orient everyone in the same direction, and you start to sort of turn down some of the cognitive dissonance that occurs in an organization when people don't quite have a 360-degree view. So when starting in a shop or when working with a shop that tends to not quite have that sort of transparency or visibility, I start to look towards trying to combine the data sources and trying to figure out how to bring some form of data visualization and some way to share that and possibly even transform some of that data into things that everyone in the company can not only ingest and perform and use to guide their day-to-day interactions, but also give them a way to see sort of what's coming down the road with regards to customer performance and sales. So in so far as that's my primary goal, that's sort of what took me to where we are. But let me tell you a little bit about NurseGrid first, and what it is we do and how we do it and why we're having this discussion today. So NurseGrid is started off primarily as a solution to help nurses get their schedules more effectively in an industry of healthcare that in so many ways is very progressive. In a lot of ways it's not as progressive as it could be. So nurses even now still get their schedule on paper or in various amounts of emails, or have to go in and actually copy it down off of a whiteboard. And NurseGrid was founded by nurses for nurses, and the initial effort was to make it so that nurses could get their schedule in an easy format that was shareable and that was manageable and maintainable. And so that's sort of where our mobile app was born from. And then through that, we also realized that we're only solving the end user problem. And while that's a viable and a valuable problem, to this point, we have over 1 million downloads nationwide, and we're probably the most popular nursing app in the entirety of the country. We have, I think, 4.9 star ratings in both the Google Play and the iTunes Store at the moment. And all of that is due to the fact that we've put our end users first. But within that chain, we've also realized that hospitals have a difficult time distributing the schedule to those end users, and that there were other problems that we could help solve as well throughout the life cycle of a nurse's schedule and their day-to-day interactions. And so that's when we incepted a departmental solution and a more enterprise hospital-wide solution that we use to allow nurse managers to take the schedule and manage it and distribute it to all their staff within the department. And that enables everyone in the department to then openly swap shifts, to communicate about their schedule with each other, and to also call off if they're sick or something happens, as well as it gives the nurse managers a way to manage capacity and find people when they need them in clutch situations, or to make sure that everybody understands sort of the departmental changes as they occur. With that, we're now implementing in more and more hospitals nationwide, as well as clinics, and we're solving a larger problem of retention, as nurses, I think their number one issue in almost every hospital has been schedule distribution and maintenance and management, and they are overworked simply due to a lack of optimization around staffing, as well as visibility to their own schedules, which again, seems like it's a problem that's solved in a lot of other industries, but nobody's done it specifically for nurses kind of the way we have. So as we begin to iterate and go forward, the question of data for us and sort of the visibility to how people are able to receive their schedules and activate on their schedules, and then sort of the greater work performance data that comes from that, have become a concern, not only for our customers, but for us too, because that helps us do product iteration. So that's NurseGrid, I guess, in a snapshot. these are some of the things that I kind of taken with me over the years in learning. It doesn't really matter what vertical you're in. It's essentially sort of baseline rules of what you need when you're trying to help an organization grow and trying to scale, and what the quickest way to doing that is. So using what works, the known solutions that you've worked with in the past is obviously a faster way to get to where you need to go, but most paradigms are often easily reproducible and represented in a company. So creating dashboards for people to see, creating big boards for the entire office to understand how everything's going, you actually bring about a quicker understanding in a snapshot of everybody's world, and nobody really wonders how things are going from a day to day, and that's super important. I think I mentioned this earlier, but getting the data out from just specific teams, sometimes engineering has their own metrics, sales definitely has their own metrics, marketing has certain metrics and KPIs. Each team has those important nuggets. Well, they're just as important to other teams as they are to the primary team that those emanate from. Now, not necessarily in the same way, but everybody contextually gets a lot of information from those, and that helps bring about a deeper understanding of learning throughout the organization that can be shared. And I think that's really important. And it's an important thing to keep in mind as we go through this, but I also think it's just a good nugget for a takeaway. Customer success. You could say almost any good company lives and dies by their customer success team. We're really fortunate to have a wonderful team here at NurseGrid. And one of the things that they were starved for initially when I got here was data. They had no real great visibility into how things were going. They had no great way to pre-anticipate churn or any sort of disruption, and they needed to get better metrics in front of them, not only to help communicate with the customers or head off any issues initially, but also to be able to share sort of how well our solution is performing in any given situation with those customers. NurseGrid in and of itself right now is mostly a workflow solution in that where we are within the ecosystem of the hospital, we're enabling sort of between the systemic aspects of EMR and the workforce management systems and sort of the end user, the nurses, we're enabling a communication flow and a greater visibility to the nurse managers as to how things are working with their staff, not only against scheduled hours, but hours worked, and tying all that data back together is really critical for a lot of those nurse managers and those clinics and facilities. So getting some level of data insights there not only was something that we needed to do for us, but it was something we needed to do for our customers.
Hey, Lorenzo, I have a couple questions for you. You talk about getting the data out and sharing data amongst different groups such as marketing, sales, product, engineering stuff. How, you know, in your role, either at NurseGrid or maybe throughout your career, how have you found it to be best to normalize the data you speak to and raise awareness about the data that's being tracked and KPIs being measured?
That is a really good bunch of questions, not just a question. Let me see what I can do to answer some of that. I think getting the data into one place can really turn down a lot of the noise and allow you to get sort of a more unified view. I think the interesting thing about data is perception. It doesn't matter. Each team could have their own view of the data, and their perception and their view of that data can change the context of what they're thinking about that data and what that means to them. And part of the critical work, and I think maybe the core piece of the questions that you asked me is that I think as you start to surface that data, having whole company conversations about what that data means to everyone and starting to agree upon those points across those data points allows you to normalize those data points, right? An understanding of what customer churn means semantically to the company and understanding what that figure means. While 3% might be super high for some companies, it might be incredibly low for others. And so you have to decide what it means to the company itself, and then how you quantify and qualify that data point. And if you can create a point of consistency for that data to come from, whatever the systems, then you start to create sort of more of that global understanding of those data points and start to bring it out of those silos. Some data only makes sense within the context that it's within, and even in that case, helping everyone understand that that's why it exists the way it exists and what it means goes miles towards clarity and getting everyone on the same page. Hopefully that
it does
scratch the itch of the question. So
yeah, and I have a second one as well. So
Sure.
I remember in our conversations leading up to this session, which is going really well so far, you had talked about how customer success is super critical at NurseGrid. Can you expand on that, on what, why a certain key stakeholder at a company is so important to adoption and thriving in the platform?
Yeah, I think customer success is important on many levels, right? I think the first place it becomes critical, especially for us, is at the point of interaction with our customers. We're not only solving workflow issues, we're also solving really salient pain points, and in some cases, we're collapsing people's work days. Tasks that sometimes take folks 8 hours a week or 10 hours a week to perform, we're able to mitigate almost entirely or diminish greatly. And in doing that, you start to surface other issues and other workflow problems. And having a team that can attend to those issues and also work through that stuff is critical. And it's also, critical to the customer lifecycle. I think making sure that you can get your customers what they need, how they need it, and then give them a view into how much better their lives are becoming to help them sort of stay on track with the solution and to grow and help you grow with them grow with you, so that you can expand the business opportunities is critical. And I think it's easy to just start to solve a problem and then not understand how much you've helped that customer grow, or for them not to understand it. People take that for granted over time. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all here to solve a problem, but if you can help outline sort of the trajectory of growth and where you can get to and how much better things could even be as you go forward, I think that's really critical. So for us, the other thing about customer success I've always found interesting, especially on the technology side, is that customer success is like a really good canary in the coal mine in some cases of larger systemic issues or platform problems that you might be experiencing or about to experience based upon fit issues or performance issues. And having a good communication flow between the teams, certainly at that level, really helps dispel a lot of early issues that might come up later on that you were blind to if it hadn't have come from those relationships that customer success keeps with your current customer base.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I think the last thing was, I think I covered the holistic view of data through the rest of my spiel there, so we can probably go to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about NurseGrid before Panoply and Chartio, what things looked like for us. Basically, limited data availability, very limited access to data within the teams. Decision making wasn't super informed. Everyone was running off of tribal knowledge and hearsay. Not at all common in a smaller operation or a startup, but it was people were making decisions based upon that understanding, and that was dangerous in some aspects. We have disparate data sources. There were, I think this happens in almost any company. You end up, we live in a wonderful day and age where you can avail yourself of different services and systems online. Those services and systems are the way to help you grow and scale your business, so you don't have to build a lot of those things and you can just pay a monthly fee to get them. What that means is all of your data is getting pumped into those systems. And so while you're solving one problem of performance or scale and utility, you're not necessarily bringing that back into the greater customer picture and the greater company picture. And certainly when I started here, there were those things happening and more. Everyone is sort of starting to get buried under an avalanche of tools, if you will, now as an end result. But also we had multiple internal data sources for our application, and those weren't necessarily reporting out the same data, or if they were, we were creating those reports manually through the use of code and exportation, and then slightly massaging them to try to give customers or ourselves some point of view that we could try to run the company off of. But those were not really data ready or data accessible. So that was a trying problem for us. And then on the customer side of things, and this is interesting, and it's a core piece for NurseGrid as we're a workflow solution, because a lot of the problem that we're solving is not only is the distribution, but the maintenance of the schedule, and also sort of a posthumous look once the schedule has already been enacted. Getting that data back out and sharing it with the customers is critical, because a lot of time they have a time and attendance system somewhere else in the chain of operations on their side, and they need to rectify scheduled hours against time worked. And for them, that gives them a really good understanding of performance. It gives them a really good visibility into how overworked or underworked aspects of their staff are, where they can make certain optimizations. And just by our being able to share some of the outputs from what has happened in our system back to them, they're able to really close a lot of gaps and make better learnings and decisions on their side. And doing that early on was all, again, performance driven decisions that had to come out of our application by our engineering staff. So rather than having people focus on core application development, we had a lot of people focusing on trying to generate reports on the regular, and then certain customers became, for lack of a better term, addicted to that reporting solution or style and need. And now we had a weekly report that we were generating either by hand or trying to build automation for that. And that was really starting to rob sort of the focus of what we were trying to do for the rest of our users on the platform. So yeah, more on that. Our team has always been relatively small here at NurseGrid. We operate with a pretty tight, lean team all the way across the board, and everyone's asked to do multiple items and tasks on the daily and wear many hats, and that's startup life. But in doing that, doing one additional ask or many additional asks of something that's not necessarily related to the core mission at the time for the go forward, or customer service needs gets a little onerous for people because it's just one more task on their plate of things to do. So going back to where I was talking about before with starting here, I pretty quickly realized that a lot of the systems were disparate and disconnected, and that we were trying to hew together reports by hand, and that was taking a lot of time and effort. And so I implemented a free tool basically to test my hypothesis and see if I was right, and also if I was, then to start to show what we could do by trying to pull some of those disparate data sources together and try to take some of the burden off of the application. All the reporting needs were coming off the core application at the time, and reporting can take a lot of resources, and so getting an understanding of a reporting database, even if it's just a clone off of production, that sometimes can really help expedite performance just on the application itself. So I did that, and we stood up. Well, I stood up Metabase basically, which is a great tool, and it's free. The trick there was that my joining NurseGrid had already been around for 3 years at that point, and had a significant amount of data. And with the amount of free mobile users we have, along with all of our paid customers, it makes for a rather large data set. And the way it was organized, it was not at all organized for reporting or for data surfacing needs. It was all constructed for application performance needs and support. And oftentimes those structures are very, they don't play well together. When you start trading pros and cons for the other, which is why it's important, I think, to separate those needs when you can. A lot of you probably are saying, yeah, I get it, and I've been there and done that, or we've seen that before, or that's why we don't have these things conjoined. But early on, they were all coming out of the same place. So standing up a separate database and Metabase on top of that went a super long way for us. But we ran into problems pretty early on, insofar as we had I still had a bunch of disparate tools that were not connected to that, and I also had an entire data store that wasn't connected to that. That was just the primary application data store. So while it helped with some of the customer service needs and it helped with some of the initial needs, all it did was prove out my thesis that we needed something that would do that work and that could start to become a little bit more self-service for the folks here. And that took me on the quest, looking for something that was scalable, and then something that would bring all of our data into one place. And that's how I ended up with Chartio and Panoply. I'd had experience with both of them before, but the key was that I could bring two very, a relational database and a non-relational database together into one data store, as well as several other tool sets, and then we could operate across the top of them and create dashboards, not only for us, but for the customers. And it worked. That's where we are now. So next slide, please. Effectively, once everything's set up and running, the wonderful thing was that I could free up my engineering staff again. So rather than having them having to continue to iterate on reports because the customers wanted to see something slightly different, or maybe, as some of you know, once you start giving people reporting, they start realizing all of the other reports that they want to see, or the way they want to see the data changed, or a different view. And rather than having folks iterating on that constantly, I now had a place that we could effectively allow them to kind of explore their own data, or a place that was much easier for some of the other teams, not engineering focused, to be able to get that data for them. Collection management and visualization, that is critical. At some point, if you're just spinning numbers back up, people start to forget what those numbers are about. So if you can give them something graphical and easy to understand, it's amazing how much joy a pie chart brings sometimes, but that's just the truth of the world, and that's why they exist. And if it's easy to turn on, like it is in Chartio, with a quick visualization pick, then it's I think it makes it that much more enjoyable for people, certainly like me, so that it's one less thing that have folks having to support and maintain and try to augment as we go forward. And the best part is things are built to scale, and as we scale and as we grow, I think the tools only get better. We're able to see more, we're able to create more views, and we're able to get at more data and reporting needs for not only ourselves, but for our customers. Next slide. So yeah, I think you've heard me go over this over and over again, but I can't really underscore the importance of this. I think empowering our customer success teams, and I think empowering anyone's customer success teams to help with the health and adoption, is paramount, but also being able to see down the pathway towards customer churn and any issues that you can pre-anticipate through the data is not only super magical, but critical. Trying to get some of our disparate tools together have allowed us to figure out workflows and ameliorate some things from not only a customer perspective, but our own internal perspective. We use Intercom, not only in our mobile apps, but also on our website and our web tools, so that people can interact with our customer service teams really directly and very immediately. It's great because we're in constant real-time communication with folks. It's difficult tracking the issues and having them map back to the things that we're working on. And so binding Jira and Intercom together through Panoply and Chartio gave us a way to understand sort of the life cycle of issues and give us some sort of trending and analysis that we can work with to even figure out size-wise if the importance of the issues that we're seeing or the recurrences and time to solution, stuff like that. And then also, we actually provide straight Chartio reports to our customers. We either send them via the automated email, or we give them a dashboard that they can operate on. They can change date ranges and do a little bit of spelunking on their own. And that, giving that one step further beyond the company and into the customer's hands, it's their data. They should be able to operate on it. And by our giving it to them and giving them a way to access that really helps us ensure some fidelity with the relationship, but also a lot of loyalty it's allowed us to grow the business a lot more quickly because we're not having to build those tools. We're able to just share those tools. Right, so I think these are consistent themes, thankfully, but just going over them again, getting all the data out to the teams, and even if you have to be selective and you start to go through that with different team leads and understand what's important to all of them, being able to share what's important to every team, as well as maybe some shared company goals and data key data points, and having that surfaced in a way that everyone can digest and understand and get on board with, you start to just bring about the unalienable truths as to how you should run the business and what you should get after. And I think that's just critical. BI is also critical, and mostly what I've been talking about is that sort of semantic understanding and that semantic learning about that data. And I think the socialization of those key data points is what allows you to have the insights into your business you need, but operating without that throughout the entire business, through all of your tool sets and throughout all of your data stores, if you don't have a sort of a combined look at your data, you're doing yourself a disservice. And then sharing your data with your customers, it's their data, and ultimately, if you're doing what you set out to do and sharing that with them, even if you're not, and showing them where things are going wrong, maybe the two of you can then work to achieve through that dissonance or that disconnect. And we've found it critical for not only our success, but our customer success. And I can't encourage that enough. So here's the after. We connected all the previously disparate data and made it available for everybody to get after. I mentioned we have a NoSQL database that's primarily a volatile data store for us that we use, again, primarily for some customer real-time integrations we have with some customers, and pulling that into our relational DB and combining them in Redshift has made it so that we have kind of a more holistic performance understanding of the connectivity between the two systems, but it also allows us to do trending, reporting, and analysis against those two different sources of data, as one of them is more of a pure data input from the customer, and the other one's more of how we interact and output that data. And so being able to look at it posthumously has been wildly useful for us, not to mention all the tools and the way we've been able to pull them together. The biggest win we've had is just the cross-company data availability, and we're still working on that, and it's going to be something that we're going to continue to work on. But as we're able to iterate and share those dashboards and starting to put that stuff up on the big screen for the company to digest, it really goes miles towards keeping everyone focused on the same goals. And then I don't know how to explain the downward pressure on our core application that reporting was putting on it, but I've seen it time and time again where you start not being able to service your customers because of the applications going down, because you're running that certain 6-month trending analysis on there. And even if you do it in the middle of the night, you start to lose uptime or connectivity. And in some cases, you just grind your services to a halt. And I think separating those two and not ever having to worry about that again has been critical for us. And then,
hey, Lorenzo.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. But
No, it's great.
You had said once on a call that one of the nice things about combining a few of the data sources, Jira, Intercom, and production database, was to shorten the cycle between issue discovery, like maybe with the customer success team, to deploying a fix. Could you speak to that? Because I think in terms of if there's someone that is on this webinar, either at a SaaS company or in an engineering group, I think that's something that would be really beneficial to hear. So can you speak to shortening that feedback loop and the feedback and fixing loop?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we early on we tied our Intercom to our Jira through Slack reporting. So essentially, an issue would come in and we would report it and open a ticket. But Jira doesn't give you a really great way to introspect sort of the amount of issues coming in and the type of issues. And Intercom is really great at closing the loop with the customer, but from an engineering perspective, you just don't really have a great visibility between sort of the types of issues coming in and the types of solutions that we're doing on the other side, and the ticket life cycle that happens in Jira, and then being able to sort of close the loop between all three of those things. And that's been wickedly successful for us, just insofar as it's giving us greater visibility and then allowing us to trend not only the types of issues coming in, but also just sort of the type of closures we're having. So as we begin to shut those tickets, how they map back to the Intercom customers, and sort of the time to issue identification to assignation to solution has been really cool. It's something that we're still iterating on. It's something that I expect will get more mature over time, but it was something that also one of our customers really needed to see for them to understand. And it was great for us to be able to expose that to them, like how long it was taking us to address and deal with the issues that we had coming in from the field, from some of their people, and for them to be able to share that with management. It's a great trust giver on a larger corporate scale. So that was really great, and it's been really useful for us. And I highly recommend it if you can do it. Yeah. So here are some examples of some of the dashboards that we have. Some of the names have been changed to protect the innocent, but it just sort of gives you an idea of the type of things that we were just talking about. So like this is a chart, or some charts from our Intercom activity, messages that have come in, some quick looks at trending, right, just across the last 30 days, and also some analysis of when we see spikes in message creation, and then the amount of issues we're able to close across the top of that. And then the bigger thing for us was understanding not only the throughput of issues when they happen, and we could tie that back to release cycles, which we don't have exposed here, but that's been something that we've been looking at, but also sort of the type of reporting that we're getting in by type. And so you can kind of see that in that pie chart down there in the lower right, of just sort of issues that we saw, how they recurred, and what types we saw. And I think the thing that is always interesting is that training and product education always seem to trump a lot of the technical issues. And that's just really a testament not to the technical team knocking it out of the park, more just that it's one of those things that it gives us a leading indicator that we can always be better. But also I think one of the partners that this is highlighting, they have a very difficult time disseminating product knowledge into the field, and so we're constantly working to get that better. But it's a great thing to surface for them, so that it helps drive that notion along forward with them as well. So next slide, unless there's any questions, of course. This is implementation progress for us, and sort of a look at where we've implemented, what activation looks like with turning them on, and sort of a regionality of it a little bit. And activation we're tracking here as amount of users within a certain facility, and sort of we have thresholds set. So at a certain point, we never expect 100%, because part of activation for us means that every person in a facility is actively using our core application. Some of those people have a regular schedule, and they don't need scheduling software. They have a set schedule. They work 10 to 4 every day, or whatever it is, and therefore they're never going to activate. But for the people who don't have that, we try to help surface what the activation rates look like, help socialization within the organizations, and then help them get people onto the solution, so that we can help get them more visibility and trend in the right direction. So that's a lot of what that is. Next slide. Yep, more of the activation statistics, where we've seen activations managed users is sort of our internal parlance for people who are not a free user, but within a paid account, and they're having their schedule distributed to them from their department. It just gives us a look at how they've activated within those departments. We often have free users operating within those departments as well. And then kind of a look at shifts. That's sort of our internal currency as to how many people have worked the shifts that have been sent out, and then versus shifts that have been modified. Open shifts is a really interesting indicator for us in our industry, insofar as it's the biggest open telltale sign of performance. And we help incept these schedules and distribute them, but there's always holes in these schedules. And so one of the tools that we have within our application is a notion of sending out an open shift request, which then folks can answer. And those open shifts sometimes go unanswered because there's just not enough staff. And that's something that we're starting to look into as an organization and trying to help assuage as well. So that's a really important metric for us. And this is a fun slide. Just shows us, shows a lot of hospitals where we're touching across the United States, and then also missed versus total staff, and what's going on there. And there's a pretty ginormous jump on one of those days, and it was one of our clients had a giant offsite and took all of their folks to that offsite, so that was why there was this rather large jump on that day. So you're looking at people holding down the fort versus everybody in the offsite, and that was affecting the graph pretty dramatically. So yeah, I think that is all of the sample dashboards we cooked up. So
that's great. I really appreciate kind of a walk in your shoes over the last year or two at NurseGrid, and really awesome to take a peek under the hood and kind of see some of your graphs. Curious to know, I have some questions coming in from the audience, and if you do have a question, please, now's the time to ask it. We do have some that have already been asked, so I'll attend to those. Most of them are for Lorenzo, naturally. So, which questions use data the most inside NurseGrid, and for what purposes?
Which questions use data inside NurseGrid?
Which teams use data the most in NurseGrid, and like what kind of questions are they answering?
Got you. I think it's all over the map. Customer success is definitely probably one of the larger consumers of data internally. I think just because they're trying to stay on top of things, and they're really trying to operate with so many leading indicators as they can. Sales, also really important. Honestly, the output from sales and sales tools is really important to the rest of the organization, so that's really interesting. Marketing, response rates, and then also sort of a tie back to performance that we can trend across the application and activations from ad campaigns that have been run, right? Outreach, email performance, all of those things we try to roll back into initiatives that we have that tie back into the larger product initiatives. And we're just now getting to a point of maturity where we can kind of do a little bit more mature product marketing associated with marketing pushes, and have that become its own thing. So I imagine that's going to start to turn into something pretty critical. The product team absolutely looks at usage. We have 6 front ends. All of them have different utilities. Some of them are the same but have different audiences, and so understanding sort of adoption and utility across all of those different front ends is really important for them, and also being able to figure out where to implement the next feature and how to push against any of those front ends, and if they all need to have the same iteration flow and whatnot. That's all very important. And then engineering, obviously, we're constantly taking a look from a technical perspective as to the stressors on the system, and sort of looking at the sales pipeline and making sure that we're responding to scale and growth accordingly. So I think I think I skittered across the top there, but hopefully that answered some of that question.
You did, thank you. And then when you deploy a stack, such as the one you have with Chartio and Panoply, and coming from the older solution that you had in place, nothing ever always goes to plan. So I'm curious to know, like, what was a point in your stack deployment where you got stuck, and then how did you overcome that hurdle?
With Chartio and Panoply in particular?
Yes.
I think we got stuck at the same place, interestingly, where we got stuck sort of with Metabase, which was just that our core application is not super data analysis friendly, right? It's just not meant to be some sort of a reporting database. And so the data that you would normally want to join together is just not, it's expensive to get at, and it's not structured well for any of that. So we weren't able to connect with Panoply right out of the box. We needed a lot of help sort of massaging our tables in a database. But once that happened, I think we were off to the races. It just took a little while for us to identify that was what was going on, and that we needed to kind of approach importation on a different scale. Conversely, when we hooked up our NoSQL database, that all worked out great. So we were able to get going really pretty quickly and effectively. I don't want to say initial implementation was a low touch, but that was certainly probably the stickiest point that we had. And then after that, it's just been, as we identify systems or services that we think we would get benefit out of seeing against other data or tied into the greater data ecosystem for reporting, we've just been connecting that. And both Chartio and Panoply have been really great about accommodating almost everything that we've thought about hooking together, and it's gone really quick, really great. So I'm super enthused, but the ETL aspect of things became critical for us just due to the way things were structured in our application database.
Nice. Can you go over the data sources you're bringing in Panoply, at least the ones you want to disclose?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned our primary database, which is MySQL. We have a NoSQL DB, it's in Mongo Atlas at the moment. And that's the primary application data. And then from the services side of things, we have Intercom connected, Jira. We've looked at connecting Salesforce. And we did it once and we kind of had a false start, and that was more on the Salesforce side, not really the Panoply and Chartio side of things, but we're working on that. Let's see. I'm blinking right now, sorry. I think we have our email marketing is connected, and Google, I think, is connected as well for analytics. And then we also have Mixpanel, and that's connected as well for the mobile apps. So I think that's a lot of the core stuff that we have.
Great.
Going in right now. Yep.
That's great. Cool. Well, hey, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for kind of walking your shoes and the lay of the land. Appreciate it.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So in terms of next steps, we would love, both Chartio and Panoply would love for you to give our solutions a try. We do have a free 2-week trial that we would love for you to give Panoply a kick of the tires. It's on the Panoply side, it's the full version. So we have full capabilities, unlimited data sources and storage, so you can try on the solution to however you see fit. And then so next step would be to start a trial, and then the next step would be to schedule a talk with one of our data architects. We do have some really great data architects based pretty much all around the world. So no matter what your time zone, you can get someone on the phone that we can walk through your data structure. We can look at your queries. We can help you be sure that you're getting the most out of your data. So do us a favor and take those 2 next steps. Start the trial and then schedule a call with an architect if you see fit. At this point, I want to say thank you, and join us on the Panoply community if you want to continue the conversation. And as I said on the onset of the call, we are going to be giving out the recording of this, and we will send a follow-up email in the coming days But right now I want to thank both Tracy and Lorenzo and say thank you very much and have a great afternoon.